All right, so we're going to shift over, start to talk about some more people that help the president do their job from day to day. First up is the press secretary. And so here we see President Trump's press secretary, Katie McElhinney, and she is in the middle of a White House briefing. So she's performing her role as spokesman for the president. The press secretary is one of the most visible people in the president's administration because they speak to the media, which means they're the person that we are most likely to see. They serve as a spokesman for the president in dealing with the media. One of their main jobs is normally every day they host a daily briefing where reporters are able to ask questions to the administration, and the press secretary acts as a spokesman for the administration. They begin the briefing by announcing the president's schedule for the day, and then they take questions from reporters. And so this is as close as reporters get on a day-to-day basis of asking questions to the president. So the press secretary here is going to answer questions for the president. They're responsible for defending what the president does, and they're responsible for defending the policy stances of the president. Now, under President Trump, these daily briefings actually stopped. They did not have briefings every day. They had very, very rare briefings, but this is something that we expect to come back and be a normal policy under President Biden. The press secretary is usually going to be somebody who has a background not in politics and policy, but has a background in news media, because their focus is going to be on communication and making sure that the message is always communicated well to the media. So the president's going to want somebody with expertise in media. So they're traditionally going to end up taking questions from a group called the White House Press Corps. The daily briefings, they happen every day with the same group of reporters. The daily briefings are always televised. The daily briefings are going to produce like sound bites for news programs to discuss and everything. And so the press secretary and the press corps are going to work together every day, and so they're going to start to form a relationship where the press secretary knows the reporters in the room. And let's talk about those reporters. All right, the White House Press Corps, which is here. This is the other side of that podium. You see a room stuffed full of reporters. This is the White House Correspondents Association. This is the group of journalists who cover the president and are the goings-on at the White House. They basically work in the White House. They sit around the White House all day. They work for media organizations, so we'll end up talking about them a lot later. But they serve as the eyes and ears of media organizations. So all the different newspapers, news channels, and stuff have these people who are hired to just be around the White House all day, and they have to sit here and wait for news to come from the press secretary. When the president travels, they travel with the president. They have to always be ready to report on any sort of presidential action or any kind of crisis that's taking place. All right, now let's talk about one of the most important people in the government, not the president, but who is the president talking to here? This is the chief of staff. Here's Obama with his first chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel. When I look at this picture, it looks to me like the chief of staff is the one in charge. The chief of staff looks like they are giving direction to the president, and that's very true of what this relationship is like. So let's talk about the chief of staff, a person who has a ton of power in the government, and your average American has no idea who they are or what they do. Here's President Trump in his Oval Office, and right outside is his first chief of staff, Reince Priebus. This is an important picture. This shows Reince Priebus acting as a gatekeeper. Basically, you don't get to the president unless the chief of staff decides that you do. This is a really important role of the chief of staff. But let's talk about what the chief of staff does. This person is the main assistant to the president. Nobody in all of government works closer with the president than the chief of staff. The chief of staff is the president's right-hand person. This is the highest-ranking employee in the White House. So they oversee all of the White House staff. They can choose who's hired and fired and all this stuff. They are in charge of the hundreds of people that make up the White House staff. They are appointed by the president. Since they work only for the president, they do not need to be approved by the Senate. They're basically going to serve as the president's assistant, the president's handler. So the president gets whatever choice of person that they want here. And they can be fired by the president whenever the president decides. Here's President Obama talking with one of his other chiefs of staff, one of his later chiefs of staff, Dennis McDonough. Here, we want to talk about what the chief of staff does. The chief of staff is going to oversee all of the action of the whole White House staff. Now, they're also going to manage the president's schedule. They make the president's schedule. The president does not have time to make decisions about what meetings they're going to attend and stuff like that. So the chief of staff makes the schedule. They tell the president what the president's going to do for the day. So they come in, they say, Mr. President, you have this meeting, and then we're going to go here. You have to meet with this group and all this kind of stuff. So they make the schedule for the president. They make decisions about who gets to meet with the president. This is why we would call them a gatekeeper, because they manage who gets in, they manage what information gets in. If the chief of staff does not want you to meet with the president, you don't get to meet with the president. And so this is why the chief of staff has a tremendous amount of power. So they're able to advise the president on strategy. They're able to advise the president on issues. This is a 24-hour-a-day job of helping the president make every decision that the president's going to make. Here's President Trump with one of his chiefs of staff, General John Kelly. So in a lot of ways, the chief of staff is the manager of the president. They're kind of the boss of the president. They're at least the day-to-day boss of the president. That's why this relationship is so important. The president has to choose someone that they really trust to be the chief of staff, because the chief of staff is going to be in charge day to day. The chief of staff is such an important job that chief of staffs tend to go on to other high-profile jobs. We talked a lot about how the vice president is kind of a dead-end job, but the chief of staff is a job that gets you somewhere. You're a successful chief of staff, you may go on to more important jobs later. So Gerald Ford's chief of staff ended up becoming the Secretary of Defense. Dick Cheney was a chief of staff, and he went on to become vice president. Obama's first chief of staff became the mayor of Chicago. So chief of staff is a job where you really get to show how good you are at running the government. You often get opportunities to run bigger things. All right, that's it for administration. We're going to take a few seconds here and talk about our big ideas. Here's President Trump getting ready to swing this baseball bat. You can see Vice President Pence behind him. So proud of Mr. President holding this bat here. Let's talk about our big ideas today. All right, those approval ratings are so important. You want to make sure that you can explain how the approval ratings are going to impact policymaking. The president's always thinking about the approval ratings. When the approval ratings are high, the president needs to keep doing what they're doing. When they're low, the president needs to change something up. Make sure we can explain those kind of things. We also want to make sure we can describe the role of the vice president. What is it that the vice president's doing all the time? What's the role of the press secretary? And more importantly, what is the role of the chief of staff, right? You're an informed person following government and politics. So you know that the chief of staff is the most important person we talked about today. All right, that's it for presidential administrations. We are just about wrapping up talking about the president and focusing on the White House. So we will do a couple of agencies that deal specifically with the president. We're beginning our shift into more of the federal bureaucracy.